think we should just go ahead as best we can and see what we can do.
Right. I'm hoping Carlos can join us. He said he could, so I can just report that I have met with my Fordham colleagues and they seem pretty excited. Now they have some reservations in terms of like how prescriptive they can be, but they will want to work with those that are in their department. That's about maybe 6 or 7 people that seem to be willing to work on this in a way. Now I can't speak for them. So I just wanted to report this back in an informal way.
Who's the they? Is the department chairs or the faculty in the departments or what?
So I spoke with the department chair and some faculty, and the faculty, there were like 5 or 6 that were very, very excited. The chair says he can't really, as in his position, take as a chair a position on this, but he personally is very supportive, and I think, yeah, we can sort of weave them in.
Yeah, the department we're talking about is economics?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now this is just within your university, right?
That's just for my university, but because my business school dean is the one leading this and Father Garanzini is sitting here, I thought it might make sense that they are involved, even though those are 2 independent.
Yeah, well, but my question really relates to the other Jesuit universities and how things are coming there.
Right. So they have a meeting, an official meeting, April 4th. It's going to be on Zoom like this. So that's moving forward. I sent you the letter, I believe, that was sent out to those presidents and deans. And the good thing is that I hear many presidents and deans apparently are knocking on the door why they are not involved. So.
Oh, oh, that's good news.
Yeah,
and let us in.
Yeah, exactly. And then I have a number of people from other Catholic universities that are not Jesuit that want to be involved, at least at the president level. And so I mean, I see this as a good sign, but there's maybe right now too much indirected commotion. So I'm hoping that they can sort of set and project manage that in April 4th, and then we'll see where that goes and how others can come in. There's Carlos, I see.
Hello, Carlos.
Hi, Carlos.
And Michael, hello. I should mention to you that I didn't get Kat in on this thread, so she is not taking notes.
So if you're okay, I'll record it.
Yeah,
so
fine.
That I can also share that, and then you can share it with respective people that weren't able to be on it.
Good.
Okay, that'd be great.
Great.
So the letter that you forwarded to us a while ago, that's a letter that I've regarded as pretty as you would not want widely shared, but is that incorrect?
Right. This is sort of a private. I mean, it's not a private letter. It's the letter that Father Garanzini and Carlos. Hello. I hope you can hear me. I'm just sort of like looping others in, but the initiative here is from 2 ends. One is the Jesuit leadership, and then the other is still lukewarm with the Vatican, and then Jesuit university presidents and their deans. Mm-hmm. So in this letter, it's basically the rectorate of the Jesuits, the global one, and the dean of my university inviting other deans and presidents to be involved or aware of this project. And that's where that letter went, and it's an invitation to a gathering on Zoom from April 4th, I believe. But they try to make the case that this is something where first, quote unquote, the more visible, prominent Jesuit universities should be involved and get an action plan going for the years to come. And then more and more universities will be involved. And the Vatican always said they wanted to be involved so that all the Catholic universities are on board. Somehow they seem to be so distracted at this point that they keep saying they're very interested, and they want to do something. They just can't get their bureaucracy going. So I'm quite happy that despite waiting for 3 months on that front, and before that 6 months, that the Jesuits decided to go forward. So there is something happening. It's not very fast in my eyes, but it is happening, I guess, in the speed of Catholic or whatever.
I didn't say academia.
Yeah, academia, and in that combination, it is happening. So the letter is just for your background, to see what language they're using. And I've been approached by David Sloan Wilson and Jonathan Haidt and a number of other people. And I told you about Jeff Sachs and others that so there seems to be a bigger potential web of people that want to or see their work aligned. Mm-hmm. Now, that's something that I'm thinking about how to manage, because I think the broader the tent, ultimately the better. Now, the broad tent never sort of stands if there are no strong columns. And so the question is, how can this be done in a way that it's sort of serious and content rigorous, plus other things. And
you got my warning about Jeffrey Sachs.
Absolutely, and I think Peter,
this could be the death of the whole damn project.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just sharing with you that there seems to be interest beyond that. I shared the one with Jeff Sachs, and I'm just sort of in touch with David Sloan Wilson. You know him, David, better, right?
I do, right? Yeah. Well, I introduced you at the.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's.
As I recall, you jumped in with some comments on Jeffrey Sachs also, didn't you? I mean, I hate to harp on this, but there is so much experience here that this absolutely has to be on the table if this is going to be a.
Well, I think there was same feeling backed by Josh and by myself that this is that would be a problematical relationship.
Okay. And what about David Sloan Wilson and sort of the evolutionary perspective? I don't know how much you're like connected to that at all, but it's more the science, natural science, biology.
Yeah, I've had the feeling that in past engagements with him, I mean, you're aware that some individuals are a little more overcome by their own egos than some, and that he has some of that malady. On the other hand, I think his work is sound, and I don't think it's the same kind of danger as with Jeffrey.
I don't know him or know his work, but I work closely with John Gowdy, who is an ecological economist at just emeritus at RPI now, and he thinks very highly of him. If I have the right person, so I don't see any. From the very little I know, I don't see any issues, but I don't know much about it.
Okay. So Carlos.
How are you?
Good evening, rather.
Hello.
Good evening, yeah.
Nice to see you all, and especially Michael, because I think the last time we met was in Berlin in 2016, something like that. It could be.
I think I was also in Vienna.
Oh, you were in Vienna also.
I was in Vienna. I didn't come last year. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, 1 year and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you again. So,
thank you. Nice to see you.
Well, maybe I gave you an update on what's happening in the Club of Rome, and from that we can build on.
You just got back from that meeting, and.
Well, I came back on Saturday evening. It was a fantastic meeting. We had last week the Dubrovnik meeting on the. So Michael, I'm not sure how much, and Peter, because with David we have talked more recently and more extensively about what is happening in the Club of Rome. So maybe for you, Peter and Michael, I do a little bit of more detailed updates. Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, I would say we started a revolution in the Club of Rome in October last year. in Rome at the 50th anniversary, so it was a very appropriate moment to do that, because, you know, the power of symbols, and talking about symbols and substance at the same time. So we elected two ladies co-presidents, which is the first time the Club of Rome has any woman on the top. You know, after 50 years of men leading, we thought it was the time has come to have a woman on the top, and almost everybody was surprised because we elected two women on the top, but I think it was the right thing to do. And now we have Mampela Rampele from South Africa and Sandrine Dixon de Clève, who is Belgian and American. Her father is from the US, from California, and her mother is Belgian. She's based in Brussels, and they are the two co-presidents. Developing, I would say, a very intense activity since mid-October. And in Rome, we discussed about three new programmatic framework for the club, with three elements. Although now these three elements are developing, and maybe we will include. We will include other items in the program, but the three elements are climate emergency as a short-term, as a really short-term issue. I don't need to explain you why we need to declare climate emergency. Reclaiming and reframing economics, and this has much to do with, I think, with this conversation we're having. Reclaiming and reframing economics and innovation. It's also about the reframing of innovation. And the third, which is in a way overarching theme, is the emergence of new civilizations. And I propose that in Rome, that what we are talking about, well, it's at the same time the need of the time, I guess, and also something in which the Club of Rome could excel and could differentiate itself, going beyond what other NGOs or organizations or think tanks are doing, which is to say, the Club of Rome always has said that it has having a unique combination of holistic, global, and long-term perspectives. If we talk about changing our fundamental foundation of energy and resources, switching from fossil fuels to renewables, and we are talking about reframing economic processes, in the end, this is nothing less, and it will not happen without a measure change in civilizations, a shift in civilizations. These are not minor issues. So I propose let's take the bull by the horns, and let's talk about that, about the shift, the civilization shift. And that excited a number of people, and I think it's for good reasons. And the last week we had, in collaboration with the World Academy of Art and Science, we had a meeting of 40 something, I think we were 43 or 45 people in Dubrovnik, so in Croatia, to discuss about that, to discuss about what do we understand by emerging new civilizations, what are the questions. For the moment, it's very much about, and I think that's the role of the club, to ask better questions, to make explicit some or many of the blind spots we have when we discuss about almost everything, in particular economics. We'll come back to that later, and formulate new questions, or questions which have to be formulated publicly, and also initiate new conversations between, not only between members, but also with other organizations. There were few more organizations present. Well, the members of the WAS and the club who were there, of course, all of us, we have our own jobs, and so we represent other associations or organizations in which we work. but there were also couple of persons from the Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies based in Potsdam, and a person which you may know of or have heard of, Ilan Chabai, who is a director at the IASS and also affiliated to the University of Arizona, a very interesting person with a really systemic perspective of things. And a colleague of his at the IASS, Man Fang from China, who brought very interesting insights from the perspective of a Chinese now in Germany, but doing research there, but really with valuable inputs. So, I mean, we did not reach any clear conclusion, except that there was a lot of diversity of perspectives in the room. Fortunately, it was mainly Westerners, but with a good mix of people from the Americas, from Europe, most of us from Europe for sure, but also some people from Africa, from Asia. So, and well, this is part of Europe, but this is almost another Europe, Russia, Ukraine, Croatia, Serbia. So the Europe which is not so much heard in the European Union and in usual European context. You know. We missed a representation of Latin America and the Middle East, but the Club of Rome is presently quite weak in that. So I think we created that was just the first step to create an environment, a space for people to make possible discussions and new conversations. There will be a Dubrovnik report on which we are already working, but this is just the first step of a process in which we want to involve more people, and including yourselves. So that's on the Emerging New Civilization Initiative. In parallel, as I said, we have this pillar on reframing and reclaiming economics, which is not so well advanced, and for which, I mean, we have inside the club many people who can contribute to that, including you, of course, including all of you. In the executive committee, person working on this, I mean, besides myself, of course, I'm involved, but a person involved is also Herbie Girardet. So I don't know if you know him. He's from UK, although he has lived for a long time in Australia, I think, and he's very much active also in Asia. And I will put you in contact with him. To be honest, we have still to find out how we ignite this process in the context of the club. Because regarding climate emergency, there is a climate emergency plan which was launched in December, and a number of activities are ongoing. Regarding the new civilization, we started in Dubrovnik, and a number of activities will go forward, including something will happen in Cape Town in November on occasion of the annual conference of the club. So that's for sure. Regarding the reframing and reclaiming economics, we are still pretty much in the starting blocks, I would say. And Herbie has taken some steps, but he cannot be alone on this. I'm helping as much as I can, although economics is not exactly my field, and we need more people involved. Knowing that inside the club we have, I think, many people with interests and capacities in discussing economics. But of course, we have different approaches. And you were mentioning Jeffrey Sachs, who is not a member of the club, but if we line up all the people in the club who are in one way or another, working with redefinition of economics, I think we would have a significant width of approaches.
Yes.
And it's unclear as of today how to go with this, you know, and in particular, this is something that I say every time I can. In particular, not only addressing the concept of well-being, the issue of well-being, which I say could be easily the focus for all the club members addressing economics, human well-being. And we are also in contact with the Well-Being Economics Alliance, which you may have heard of, where Stewart Wallis is involved and others. And so, okay, human well-being, yes, so economy for human well-being, but what we have to achieve is high well-being at low ecological footprint. And every time I have the occasion, I provoke with this, because for now it's an oxymoron. Sustainable development is an oxymoron. We don't have examples. It seems that some countries, but of the type of Panama or Sri Lanka, are not far from achieving a high level of well-being, human development, combined with reasonably low ecological footprint. But overall, the countries with high well-being have high footprint. The countries with high footprint, low footprint, have low well-being. At least the way we define well-being today, which in a way or another is always correlated with the GDP or the GDP per capita, with this kind of measurements of well-being, which is so much connected to material wealth and material consumption and consumption of resources. So adding this dimension that well-being is fine, but we need to combine it with a balance with the biosphere, with the situation to be in harmony with the biosphere, is already a challenge even among, let's say, the non-mainstream economists, even among the economists who are not following the neoliberal or neoclassical schools, you know. And that's I find quite easily. That's first step. I would say that probably the most successful person in the club in the last times, or as far as I hear, but maybe what I hear is not representative of the whole. But I see that Kate Raworth, with her concept of donut economies, is having quite a lot of success out there, even in institutions where you wouldn't expect that. For instance, in part of the European Commission, and we are.
It's a terrific book.
And we are in contact with people in the European Commission to work on that, and the part of the European Commission devoted to research and innovation wants to reorganize itself according to the concepts of the donut economy. So that's a big success for sure. By the way, this gives us the opportunity, David is already aware of that, the opportunity of proposing a sort of background paper for a conference, for a part of a conference organized by the European Commission on research on innovation in September. Beyond that point, and that's where I finish my intervention now, beyond that point of something which could be donut economics, to say something, I think there is still a lot to do to connect our consumption of economics and economy with a more holistic approach, and with a truly different epistemological approach to how life works, and to our, what I call, our blind spots. But that's another topic. If we take that approach, and that's something personally am very much involved in with some other members, in particular Nora Bateson. We could even discuss how do we conceive economic processes in a way which cannot be separate from nature and from society. I mean, you know that typically in the context of sustainable development, the three dimensions are separate on one side. So, and that sustainable development is balancing economy, society, and environment. That's a typical thing that you hear often. To which I say, well, this is already misleading. This conceptualization is already misleading, because you cannot simply separate, or you simply cannot separate economy from society, from environment. So making a difference between the three of them as if they were independent dimensions is already misleading, as I say, and it generally gives a privilege to economy, so that in the end you finish working with policies which give priority to economic growth.
Yeah, you're chasing your own tail with that concept.
You give priority to economic growth, and then if economic growth is there, you take care a little bit of society, and then if everything is okay, you take a little bit care of environment. That's the typical outcome. Of course, in these discussions, some topics, some crucial questions. I said before that the club, in my view, is about asking better questions. Some good questions are: do we need economic growth at all or not? And also, do we need to put a price on everything, and in particular on nature? As you know, I think this is a dividing moment, or a dividing question of between those who think that putting prices on everything we will protect better nature and environment, and those who think, and I'm among them, that we have to be very cautious about using pricing mechanisms at all. They can be useful for certain contexts, but overall, everything which is valuable in life, you cannot put a price on it. So that says something. And I stop here, because I could follow for much longer, but of course, please feel free to ask.
Carlos, just one point or on the new civilization. I've received some materials from Till a while ago, and the write-up on rethinking or rethinking economics. quite long, a page and a half or so. I thought was a very good start. And on the new civilization idea, what he sent me at least wasn't developed very well, or just was more fragmentary. And I didn't know if there was something more complete than that was under discussion at Dubrovnik.
No, I mean, as I said, Dubrovnik was a start. So what we did was to send to the attendants, and I don't think if you guys did get that, I can resend that to you. The number of background materials, some quotes from Aurelio Peccei from a book he wrote in the late 70s, The Human Quality. A good paper by Donella Meadows, Dancing with Systems, which is one of her last, if not the last, paper she wrote.
Right.
And Swerving, a short text by Nora Bateson about the depth of changes we have to face.
Yeah, if you could send us that material, would be terrific. I don't know that I have it.
Okay. And something I wrote 5 years ago, which I titled "The Greatest Adventure on Earth," which is more a vision about very much aligned with the question of new civilization, and it was written 5 years ago after another meeting organized by the Club of Rome, a previous meeting organized by the Club of Rome, which did not have much follow-ups, but this time we intend this to have follow-ups.
Right.
The point is that in Dubrovnik, it was made pretty clear that we don't have a unified vision. Neither of what we are talking about with a new civilization, okay, or if we should talk about a new civilization, and there were a minority, but there were some people saying, well, we shouldn't call it new civilization, etc. And nor there was not consensus on the depth of changes, and so to a certain point, probably what I will do now is reductionistic, but because the discussion was richer than that, but we had, I think, 4 different elements.
I'm the director of a project called Leadership for the Ecozoic. We're using the Ecozoic as an organizing idea for where we should be trying to get to. As you probably know, it's from Thomas Perry.
Yeah, no, I know that. I remember you gave a lecture in Florence at the Summer Academy, so I was there. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's definitely we need your inputs in this respect. I mean, I was saying at least 4 themes emerge in Dubrovnik. One, the theme of inner development, so transformation at the individual level towards higher degrees of consciousness. Let's call it that way. A theme of trying to govern or steward or whatever you call that, but in a certain ways to pilot, measure transformation of our systems towards sustainability. The theme of, I would call that non-Western perspectives, which was quite strong, even if we didn't have so many people, but from non-Western countries, but still, I mean, and when I say the theme of non-Western perspective, that doesn't mean that the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Africans' perspectives were the same, not at all, but they had some commonalities among them, and I would include into that the Russian perspective, for instance. So the what I call most of the world, what does most of the world say?
When you joined the call, Michael was starting to talk to us a little bit about process of how he envisions us going forward, and so could you help us along with that, Michael?
Yeah. So Carlos, just for your information,
Carlos, very much.
We have a network of Jesuit business schools, which is 100 plus, I believe. I still have to get the real number. And this is for business schools and business education and transforming business education along those lines. And I'm sure that there are various sort of strands and thought schools, and I think that's great. But I think the well-being notion, the integral human development notion of the Vatican, the Pope, the papal encyclical, the care of the planet, etc. That's the central ambition here in terms of aligning teaching and business with the Laudato Si encyclical. And that's planned to be a 6-year project, which starts with some of the global representatives of those business schools in the Jesuit frame. And then hopefully there will be, through the Vatican, more involvement in the circular inflow, outflow of those insights. And we're also doing this now with 2 other constituents. And I know that the European universities are structured differently. But in the US, the economics departments are separate from business schools most of the time. And so we're just starting with some economics departments to have the similar kind of aligned conversation in exploring teaching and research along Laudato Si at Jesuit economics departments. So that is a conversation that was birthed out of this conversation with David and Peter and others, in a way that we can have this conversation going forward in alignment with what the business schools are doing. A third piece that will develop is with businesses. So the businesses that are organized under this Catholic, whatever, broader scheme. There's an Unia PAC organization, a global business leaders organization. They also want to be involved. We I'm sort of seeing myself as the glue in terms of bringing these conversations together, because I'm not a Jesuit and I don't have the authority in that Jesuit network at this point to be much more than a facilitator. But that's what I'm embracing right now. And I think that this could be valuably be connected with what the Club of Rome is doing, what other initiatives are doing, and then also see what, I mean, with the focus specifically on economics, and also the connection with where is it taught. The most popular degree across the globe seems to be a business degree. And then much of those applications happen through business, not only, of course, but that is what I was proposing in terms of a process, but also there is no fixed process yet. There is a conversation going on with some of the deans of Georgetown University, Fordham University, ESADE in Spain, you know. Then some Latin American Jesuit universities, Javeriana in Colombia, I believe. India XLRI, that needs to be confirmed though, because they have transitions in leadership, etc. And then there are several others. There are 28 universities in the US that want to be involved. And this is the good sign. And I shared it with David and Peter that now that there's a select group of a small group, many seem to want to be in this conversation, which is somewhat unusual, but a good signal.
Michael,
that's excellent.
I want to throw in one more of my cautions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, involving the business groups, that can be very positive, but you have to be very focused on the ownership structure of those businesses. If the folks who are the heads of the businesses are in control of the ownership, mm-hmm. and they are true to their values, that can be very positive. But if they're not in control of the ownership, it's very tricky.
You mean if it's a family business, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, there's other ways to do it. I mean, it
tends to be that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there is no Catholic value in
exactly.
Unfortunately, right? And so I have to yet explore exactly what that actually is, but I've been approached in different ways that these kind of people and that those family businesses very much are interested in this conversation. And, you know, they come from very different places, and probably we will leave those conversations separately. But at some point we would I know that the Jesuits want them to be involved also for funding reasons and legitimacy reasons, and to say this is not just pie in the sky, but this is actually working on various levels.
Yeah, good.
So what are your thoughts about what the next steps you would like to see taken, Michael?
So I think what would be good is to have more of these conversations with the Club of Rome people and other people that you think are, from the scientific perspective, but also from the institutional perspective, important connectors that could facilitate this. What I can offer, and I'm hoping to arrange, is a call with the Fordham people here. They are offering to host a conversation. I'm not sure when, and I'm not in control of that either. It would be great for them to get the sense of the possibility of this conversation and their involvement. And they were very excited on various levels to just hear what I shared with them before. So I'm sensing that there is a good group of people at Fordham, and I'm sure beyond. And I'm open to have other arrangements organizationally. But Fordham is the one that's easiest for me to access. So if there are other places, other universities want to take a leadership, I think that may be even better. The one thing that I can see is that there might be synergies from having Father Garanzini here at Fordham, the UN here at Fordham in New York, and the legitimacy or the practicality of that, and the possibility of spreading it through the Jesuit network that way.
So that would be starting off with maybe in a month or two a face-to-face meeting at Fordham. Is that where this is headed?
We were talking about this, and I still see this as a possibility. I am not in control of it. That's why I'm sort of hesitant on committing to that. What I'm saying, what I can see is that we, in a week or two, have another online call like this with the people that you think should be involved. And Carlos, it would be great if you could be also involved, and maybe Herbert. And then I'm getting commitment from my Fordham people to be on that call so that they know. I will also bring this conversation again to Father Garanzini. We will meet next Monday, and we'll share with him some of the next steps. And I think he already said he's very excited by that. What they rightly do is they say, let's do one thing first. So we set it up. And that's sort of where the business school conversation is going. And the others we can sort of connect in ways. If people have their own budget and their own time, and we want to meet in New York, maybe with some of the New York UN people, I'm very willing to host everyone here. So a face-to-face meeting could be good. I would also suggest that when we do that, we want to get the right people in the room that can take the next steps forward. So it's not just a meeting, but an organizing conversation in terms of how we would use that momentum. And I have right now no real clear idea. So I'm just.
One of the requirements of the program that I'm the head of is textbook analysis. Right? I think as I told you before, including economics textbooks analysis. So that's something in which we're trying to get the students to be much more acute, and some of them are brilliant, actually. Very, very smart, very penetrating analysis of the sort of moral, metaphysical basis of these texts. So I hope that they would be, as the project matures, they would be looked upon as a very good resource. I'm sure they'd be willing to jump into the boiling pot too. They're kind of risk takers.
So let me just ask this. One thing that we need is textbooks, right? And we've said this. So I'm sure there are alternative economic textbooks. Is there a group of people that has been working on something that is sort of like the alternative Samuelson, or is the alternative to whatever, just to make it visible? Because that seems to be something that gets many people very excited very quickly, and that seems also to be a very easy sell. So if there was a focus on that, what would the textbook look like?
Well, there is a textbook in ecological economics by Herman Daly and Josh Farley. Josh is part of our group, as you know, and
right.
It's criticized as being not a sufficiently not putting enough distance between itself and the standard model. It's still quite a good book, and does lay out most of the fundamental elements of ecological economics. It's weak on the normative side, in my view, but so there's that. And it's a great question. I'll have to ponder it some more. I mean, we have a little collection of economics textbooks in the project office, but they're more or less random. And of course, the field of finance, at least as shown forth in the textbooks, is pretty much a metaphysical duplication of micro textbooks, right? So it's that's not really an alternative, more as a clone, at least in my view. So,
Peter, what's your view of the work of Neva Goodwin and Tufts, David Rockefeller's daughter?
Yeah. Well, I know her personally. I like her very much. I think it's good, and the person that worked so much with her, whose name I'm Jonathan Harris, exceptionally thoughtful person, but neither of them, in my view, is willing to take things on in the more thorough manner that I think we're talking about.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I know her fairly well, and I know she's very committed to alternative economic textbooks, but I'm inclined to agree with you that she's not adequate. Well, I feel very confident in her personal values, but I also agree that her work is not as might say revolutionary as we need to be.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's exceptionally decent and well-meaning person and very smart person.
Yeah.
And Jonathan is too. But you know, Jonathan, I can recall at one of the ecological economics meetings that he was at, admonishing the group of which I was a member not to be critical of neoclassical economics. So,
oh, good.
Of course, I've paid no attention whatsoever to that.
Yeah, well,
admonition, but it was.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize. I mean, clearly, Michael, you are very clear on this. But as you get these different points of view together, the foundational thing is, do they share the same values? If you start mixing the values, then they're in the kind of morass that we're struggling with in the Club of Rome.
Well, using the encyclical as a base, it helps to, I think, put an anchor into what's permissible and important and what's peripheral.
Yeah,
I don't agree with the whole. I don't agree with everything in the encyclical, but I've used it in my classes, and it's very effective. And so I think it's a good place to start.
May I ask something? Because whenever we talk about transformations and transitions, sustainable development, etc., there is a huge pressure to run for solutions. You know, especially now that the SDGs have been defined, and convened, and defined. A significant part of the efforts are being channeled into let's execute this perspective of the SDGs, and that's it, you know. And now we have a strong political consensus around the SDGs, and it's about implementing them. And how do we implement them? And we want solutions for that. There is a considerable anxiety about solutions, and much less energy and focus is devoted to if the SDGs are the answer, what was the question? Or if unsustainability, if the unsustainable system we have created is the answer, what went wrong with the question? You know?
Exactly. Right. Thank you. That was absolutely made my day. Right? It's only 10 o'clock in the morning. Right?
No, really, and that anxiety leads us into considering that, okay, the change of the system we have to perform is sort of an addition to what we already have. So, in particular, okay, well, we usual economics and accounting was not taking into account nature and social effects, very little of social effects and not at all nature effects, but it's just about adding these dimensions to economics. If you want to have a better form of accounting, and as I said before, put price on everything, and this way we will manage to have to create a circular economy, etc., etc.
Carlos, one thing I've noticed is that Kate Raworth's frame, she basically takes the SDGs, which I think you know I'm very suspicious of, but she kind of flips them around a little bit, so it takes the growth part out of it and defines them in a way that they fit together nicely, and then it's juxtaposed with the environmental ring. So there may be a kind of a pathway there, since she is getting such recognition. If you take her framework, I think it can work very nicely.
Well, I mean, I appreciate very much what she's doing, and I think she's at least opening windows of opportunity to consider that, for instance, growth or economic growth, we have to get out of this religion of economic growth. And of course, this is politically very much valuable. So if that works, let's go for it. But honestly, I think the effort of investigation goes even beyond that. In a way, the argument of Kate presents things which are easily understandable. I mean, easily framed for an easy
spiritual values that are not.
No, I'm not talking about the spiritual values. I'm talking. I mean, of course, this is really connected to spiritual values. No, I'm talking about epistemology, about our blind spots, about getting out, really getting out of our lack of systemic thinking, really getting out of our linear thinking. Because one blind spot we have is that even in contexts where we talk systemic, the moment after we want to have a solution, we want to have a roadmap and a linear path towards the solution, which doesn't make any sense. But my question is not this. My question is, to what extent there is a space to investigate on these topics in the context of this network of Jesuit institutions, etc., to investigate, because I'm sure that we don't have yet all the textbooks we need for reframing economics in the future. You know, we have a good amount of textbooks which are not mainstream, not neoliberal, which would be in any way very useful for the curriculum of all business schools and economics departments of all universities in the world, and they are not taught. So that would be already a great progress. But beyond that, what I think is that we don't have the textbooks of the future, because we have yet to do a lot of inquiry about what economics is and should be.
That's one of the charges we will give to our 11 PhD students. So we'll see what. I'm getting to the place where I have to sign off with great regret. I have to get to the university, and there's a taxi strike here, so we have to walk. Anyway, I'm very keen, and my colleagues I know are very keen to be active and positively contributing to this. And Michael, by all means, keep us very much in the circle of those intensely interested. And if there's a face-to-face meeting in New York or elsewhere, I'm sure we would be well represented.
Great.
Peter, I gather that we have a very strong confirmation that you agree with Carlos that basically we need some very different textbooks than anything we have.
Yes, and that's what. Well, that's where the framing of the ecozoic is helpful, right? It doesn't start with trying to mend the broken foundation of civilization as it is now. But it has a fresh start, and I think as I said before, there's things about the encyclical I disagree with, but it's a very good anchor for a project like this. And the book has obviously considerable authority. It's very well written, and we can have our differences with it, which can come out. But and the MDGs are I think as Carlos is saying a little bit more politely than I am. They're not it's sort of a mess in my opinion. So.
Can I make a request in a way that you seem to know already the textbooks that are good and out there, and maybe sort of an overview of those? If we can have that collected in some way as a starting point for a conversation, that could help.
It's not a very long list.
Okay, but maybe that already helps. And then I just want to be clear. I'm not an expert on the economics conversation, as much as I know in the broad picture how that influences in its core every other orphan in that sense. So anything, I see my role as a facilitator here, and then maybe Carlos, you can help Peter and David in a way to just set the stage.
I'll be in touch. I'd really have to walk out. I'm sorry just about this moment, but I'll be in touch with David and we'll work up a list, but I don't think it'll be very long. But anyway, thank you so much. Carlos, really great to connect with you again. And of course, David, we see each other fairly often. That's great. And Michael, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And Carlos, you said that there are some people at the Club of Rome. Herbert, I think you shared, or David, you shared a list of his thoughts at some point.
Well, Robert Costanza's a problem on the, the putting a price on everything.
Right.
But he also, at least in my view, I mean, it's too bad we don't have Peter on here, was a major figure in basically sabotaging the ecological economics and steering it away from the deep ecological living Earth frame to more of a conventional economics frame. And of course, Hunter Lovins is part of that also.
Well, yeah. So that's what I referred to. I mean, Herbert Girardet, who is, I will put you, as I said, in contact with you by email, is a member now of the ExCom of the club, and he's bolder than that. He knows that things are not fixed by putting prices on everything. So yeah, it's clear in his mind that we have to go beyond, and I think we have to be careful about how we make the most of the opportunities we find, in terms of not compromising, with the average of what exists. Even in the, as I said, even in the non-mainstream, I mean, you have different attitudes. Typically you have three. The denial, so that's still where the mainstream economics is, that not recognizing that we have challenges which will not be solved by the existing institutional arrangements, the markets and whatever. There is I would say, significant part of the people who are really worried about and know that there is a real problem have not made the last mile of thinking into the fact that some fundamental assumptions of economics are flawed. Not only the neoliberal. I mean, to a certain extent, the Marxist view of economics has also a lot of mechanistic ideas inside it, and very little exposure to non-linearities and to the interdependencies, etc. So, because these ideas, these ideologies were born in the times of the Industrial Revolution, so the moment of measure strength of mechanistic paradigms. So I would say, let's try to work with the people who know. Peter Brown is obviously an excellent example. I love what he does. I love what you do, David. As you know, as we have already discussed, let's try to work with people who know that we have to go beyond. Because many times I hear that we have already the ideas, we have already the solutions. It's just a question of implementing them. And I'm convinced it's not the case. If we do that, this shortcut to solutions is very dangerous.
I have a short little slogan for that. Anyone who thinks they have the answer doesn't understand the problem.
Exactly. And this is why
I would submit we need to try and see what works, right? And not sort of
a lot of things,
analysis paralysis, because
no, of course.
Longer of the bad ideas, and
I mean, basically, the point of that frame is that the problem is so fucking complicated beyond anything that we have sorted out as human beings that.
But this is why we need to get the best of our epistemologies at work for that, and the best of our epistemology is not what it used. I mean, if you look at the development of physics, the richness of the paradigms in physics is astonishing, and we are in social sciences, we are still using basically the paradigm of classical mechanics that no one in physics would propose as a paradigm for everything. I mean, it's well known that it has a limited applicability, but we're still using only that in social sciences. I mentioned physics because it's more or less the discipline from which we think that we have to import things, because this is the foundation of all sciences, etc. Yes, maybe, I'm not sure it's like that, but maybe, but anyway, we are using a paradigm developed in physics 3 centuries ago to analyze something which is even more complex, which is society. So I think there is already a lot of work done with other paradigms of knowledge, not so much applied to economics, and there is a richness to develop in that frontier, of well, we know where mainstream economics has led us. On the other side, we know that there are paradigms of knowledge which are much more elaborated and closer to how life works, which come from physics and biology. Let's try to make the most out of that, because in the end, the main problem I see with the SDGs is that people are doing cherry picking. I mean, the concept of the SDGs would work if we have all of them at the same time and at a global level, and this is utterly impossible. I mean, we have no tools to do that. So what do the people do? They choose what SDG they want to comply with. They choose, okay, I will do my best to improve the SDG on water or on whatever, or on food or whatever. And I focus on that, and I forget that this is interdependent with the rest of the SDGs, etc. So, and this analysis is not done because in the end, this is a list of SDGs, a wish list of SDGs. It's not a systemic perspective. It's an accumulation of linear goals. And it's much worse when you take the 170 key process indicators. So, but coming back to your point, Michael, yes, I think in the Club of Rome we have a number of people who have gone beyond the idea that with corrections to the existing concepts of economics we will make it. They are beyond that point. I think Kate Raworth is beyond that point, although I think she's extremely busy. Sandrine is trying to involve her more in the Club of Rome, but she's so successful that she's obviously very, very busy. And maybe
do I hear that you guys, at least, I mean, there seems to be so much disagreement in the details, but this framework seems to be a common agreement. David and Herbert and Carlos and even Peter, I think I heard you speak highly of that framework, right?
Basically, it is the best foundation we have, which does not mean it's perfect, but as a starting point, it's, I think, quite extraordinary.
I think it's a lever. to use Donella Meadows' expression, I think it is a leverage point.
Oh, that's good.
yeah, because it's talking to people who are in the institutions and dealing with policies, but are aware that there is a real problem, like these guys we are meeting at the European Commission. So it has made, I think it's a leverage point which we can use to go further in a language which still be acceptable for people thinking about, well, okay, but what kind of policies do we need?
Okay.
How do I
can see something, and I also have to be on another call soon, but I appreciate your time and insight and dedication. And so if I see the papal encyclical as one sort of informative document that people can agree on if we continue a conversation, and the Donut Framework by Kate as another one. I mean, David, you've tried to get Kate involved, and we know how difficult it is.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you. I actually got a response to her a few days ago from one of my emails. It was very responsive, but she said, I'm essentially, she said, right at this moment, it's the middle of the night and I'm trying to finish this and that for tomorrow. And so I'm sorry, I can't give you a longer answer, but,
well, so I mean, even without her being there, but if we can just sort of connect with her on that level and say, okay, that she knows that is going on. I have,
I sent her the draft paper that I wrote, I think I've shared with you. And I said, if you can't do anything else, when you get a chance, take a look at this and tell me whether I properly describe or articulate your view and your framework, just to kind of get that input into it. I haven't gotten a response on that yet, but we'll see.
But maybe you can inform her of what we have been talking about, and then if I see those two sort of foundations that we can share and agree on, then maybe we can also talk about textbooks as one thing. And I'm being very pragmatic. I'm sensing that there is an opening now. People are hungry for it. They need to feel that they're part of this solution conversation. At least there is no one fixed linear, of course, solution that we can all distribute.
I mean, in terms of a process, from my experience, you don't necessarily start with the textbook for the freshmen. You start with the graduate courses or the graduate seminars, in which you're not using a textbook, but you're pulling together the very best readings you can find from different elements, and then engaging the students in a conversation about where is this going, which I think is very much what Peter is doing.
Right.
That would be even more provocative, but I think it could work, because I'm more and more convinced that we don't teach anybody anything. They learn by themselves, But that's a more provocative derivation, and that's what make, for instance, what Nora Bateson does with her Warm Data Labs as formats to engage new conversations among people. And that's working pretty well, but that may be too provocative to the people in charge of business education in Jesuits, the Jesuit network. I don't know. I mean, I think we have to make the most out of. I think
that's going to be proposed. I mean, imagine that in each of these universities, that again, they don't start with the freshmen; they start with the graduate students. And within a frame that, moving forward, nobody's been where we're headed. Nobody knows how to get there or how to make it work. And in a sense, we've got to break the division between I'm the teacher and you're the student. In a sense, we're all student teachers learning together.
So what I see emerging from this conversation just now, as you're saying, graduate students, I know that there are many PhD programs, and some of them, like Peter's, are focusing on this. Maybe there is a critical mass of other PhD programs that they could form a network where these kind of conversations are naturally sort of spreading, and saying, okay, those people, as you're saying, Carlos, that are open to learning around these things, they can be part of this conversation, maybe as an overarching conversation for all of an offering for all PhD students in economics. The problem seems to be that because from the get-go, the economics students that are interested in that kind of program are traditionalists most often. So where do we get them? Where do we start to find them or get them interested in alternative economics?
Well, if you're starting with economic students, you start with the ones that are organizing to challenge the system.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of those. Obviously, you don't take the ones that are going into a conventional economics course with a great deal of enthusiasm, and they want to get themselves thoroughly brainwashed.
So,
but we have, in this context, we have Laudato Si, right? Which is even more stronger. It gives a stronger leverage point, in my view, than the SDGs.
Yeah.
Way stronger. Way stronger.
The vision is much more consistent, much more holistic in Laudato Si, and that appeals also to people who are not not Catholic, not even religious, you know. And but in this context of the Jesuit network, definitely it's like, well, that's a very strong leverage point, I think, I would say. To start, maybe the conversation is, okay, let's start about that, about what Laudato Si says, and does whatever we have been teaching, does it fit?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
What I'd like to see is there maybe, if we can get this conversation going with people that have PhD programs and a network of PhD programs, I think they must exist somewhere. So if we can involve them, and I know through the Club of Rome and the Reclaim Economics Students Networks, some of them are based at universities, some of them are endorsed by the program directors, some are not. Who would be the kind of people that you can identify? Because I think for a next conversation or next iteration of the conversation, it would be great to involve them. And then
well, I think you mentioned Peter Brown, but I mean, right. the three folks that we've Vermont. Part of this conversation,
right.
they're an initial foundation of that, right. And I believe they're all connecting their PhD programs. So this would expand that on a right. very significant scale.
Well, and maybe there are some other programs that are not focusing on the ecozoic notion, because that, to me, I don't think is yet a very popular notion, even though I think it's a valuable one, but I might be wrong on that. It's just that the Reclaim Economics students that are popping up everywhere, if there are organized other universities. I know Kate told me at one point that we had interactions at Oxford, they have a small program. I don't know how it is connected with Peter and others, and maybe it is. But
good question.
If we can find more of those, just one or two more, maybe we can also see how this conversation then can be already very fruitful for connecting these student networks.
Yep.
Great. Absolutely.
Okay. And I still sort of the idea of a textbook, I keep that in mind because I think Kate also agrees, Samuelson and those standard textbooks, they need to be ultimately, they need to be out, but they need to be substituted with something that can work. So I am not the expert on what that would be, but starting that conversation and inquiry would be, I see that for the Jesuits would be the contribution that they could do. Is they say, all right, here Laudato Si, here the textbook for it, economics, you go.
Yeah, I mean, here's a basic foundational principle, and Carlos, it keeps coming back to me. It's so relevant to the Club of Rome, that just being against something, opposition alone is a losing strategy. And the the weakness of the Club of Rome is we've been very properly against economic growth, but we've been really weak on what is it that we're for. So all this new stuff is focused on what we're for. And of course, it's exactly the same thing here. We can be absolutely against economics as it is taught, but we absolutely have to come up with a, what must replace it.
Right. Wonderful.
Now, who is on? We've got another person on this call here. George.
I think we may have a number of conversations coming up here on the Humanistic Management Network. We have one at 1 o'clock on the same line. Okay. Just for your information, it is with the United Nations Global Compact board members and presidents of the Academy of Management. So we are trying on our end to move the Academy of Management and the Global Compact UN conversation together. That's for the management piece. I think it could be valuable for the economics and other disciplines as well.
It is tricky. I mean, the other piece of the SDGs that wasn't mentioned in this conversation is this thing of if we can just lift people up over $1.25 a day, we've lifted them out of absolute poverty. Of course, I mean, it's one of the fundamental perversions of the whole development system is essentially, if we can get people off of their subsistence livelihoods, from which they often do very well, get them dependent on wage labor $1.25 a day, we have lifted them out of poverty. Hooray.
And their life is better. That's, I mean, maybe they're out of poverty, but in a sense they are.
Yeah, life has gone to hell.
And their quality of life has decreased in many ways.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Very significantly.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Carlos, for being able to join. And David, thank you for your enthusiasm and support and activism in that way. So I'm going to go back to my people here, and then I'll just report to all of you. And if we can identify a number of more people for the next round of conversations, maybe for in 2 weeks after I can report back from the Jesuit deans and president conversation, maybe that can be a good follow-up.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much
to Kate and copy you on it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Take care.
Bye.
On your next meeting.
Bye.
Bye. That's at 1. So they're just testing out the connection. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.